Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. It's Ali, Coram, and Ed Carson with a breakdown of the action in today's session, Tuesday, May 14th, where we saw a strong day for the Nasdaq, a new closing high, getting close to those all-time highs, Ed.
Yeah, it sort of crept up on us. I want to take a look at three stocks showing good action: On Holding, Embraer, and CrowdStrike.
Okay, we'll check in on those stocks, but first let's take a look at the major indexes. The Nasdaq today up 0.75% by sessions close. The S&P 500 today up 0.5% on the day. The Dow up 0.3%, and the Russell 2000 with a strong day of its own up 1.2%. And all of this action, Ed, comes ahead of another key economic report out tomorrow.
Yeah, we're going to get the April CPI inflation report. We also got retail sales, the Empire Manufacturing Index. So a lot of stuff is going to hit an hour before the open. We did get the producer price index this morning, and that was hot on the headline figures, but there were downside revisions, and some of the components of that are a positive sign for the Fed's favorite inflation gauge. So Fed Chief Powell said, no, I wouldn't call it hot. I would call it mixed. And so that seemed to help things a little bit, but it was a gradual thing through the day. And maybe we're moving out of this pause, and that pause is looking more wedgy, and you can sort of see it just sort of trending up. It just happened in the afternoon. As you say, record close, really just on there. So we'll have to see. I mean, we'll know before the open to a certain extent. I mean, the market could whipsaw around after the open, but we'll see if we can break through. And we've had a lot of setups. We've had more stocks flashing buy signals the last few days. So things are acting pretty well.
Okay, well, we'll have to see what we get come tomorrow and adjust accordingly when that new information comes out. Ed, anything to add for the other major indexes? I mean, we do have the Nasdaq here, which we do focus on a lot. And with the strength today, we now have that 21-day line back above the 50-day line. But any other index level thoughts here?
Pretty similar for the S&P. It's that 21-day is getting right around that level. It's getting up to record highs, or almost. I'm not even sure if that's a record close. I hadn't looked to check because it was sort of creeping on at the end of the day, right there. So the Russell would be nice to see that catch up. Like get to new highs. It's a little bit further off, but honestly, it's not that far off either. But getting that above would be really nice to really clear this area. But there's a fair amount of breadth to this market rally. It's not just the Nasdaq for sure.
Are you looking at RSP or QQEW, or just is it that feeling of growth stocks and what's showing up in your screens?
Showing up in screens, and I just look at a variety of sector ETFs, and not all of them on any given day, but you look at them, they're generally trending higher. They're generally showing strength. There's what are the leading stocks breaking out? They're from a lot of areas, and we've got three different groups that we're going to look at today, but there's a whole lot of other ones out there. But yeah, it'd be nice to get RSP to record highs. And so that's a little bit like the Russell, but there has been broad rally. It's just not at highs yet for some of the, below the big caps.
Yeah. I mean, we had this strong trending market for several months. We wanted to pull back. We got one. Now we got one. And it was at least the worst of it so far. You never know what's going to happen around the corner, was over pretty quick. But we are seeing a lot of setups out there. And as you mentioned, we're going to talk about a couple of really strong stocks today. Ed, I want to get your thoughts on treasury yields right now. We saw the 10-year reversing lower, hitting 4.5% and backing off. This is another metric essentially to watch come tomorrow, with more of that economic data rolling in that's going to be digested.
Yeah, this is the lowest close it looks like in a month. I mean, so it would look for a moment there that we were going to reverse higher and sort of break out of this mini downtrend, all of a sudden hitting the lowest close in a month. And so it's all definitely a big factor for that. And I guess I'd just say one other thing that we have to watch out for, like CPI and stuff. Nvidia's coming in just over a week. That is just one thing to note, especially when you're thinking about chips and AI, but really the whole market. Nvidia is looking very interesting here, but it's just, that's a handle right there. It's looking really good. but it's just something to note. If you're adding exposure, and by all means, people can be adding exposure, but just don't get too wild, aggressive in the next week, knowing that something like that could come in and roil things quite a bit.
Right. And I do own a position in this, full disclosure. And when you say Nvidia is coming next week, earnings. So we have
Yes.
earnings on the table for Nvidia. I'm sure everyone in our audience, such savvy investors, they knew exactly what you meant, Ted, but clarifying just in case. And speaking of earnings, let's take a look at On Holding. This is ticker ONON, with a strong report here, up 18% on the day. Heavy volume behind the move. We're going to take a look at this stock on multiple time frames, Ed, because it's very interesting. We'll start with the daily here. What are you seeing?
Daily, very nice. And just on the fundamentals, it blew out views because it was more than double a year ago. And I think the expectation was for actually fall a little bit versus a year earlier. I mean, On Holdings it's really a surprise. You don't know what you're going to get with their earnings reports. And last quarter, not so good. This quarter, very strong. It came up just really quickly right at the open and immediately just raced past an early entry like the last week's highs, got above, and then it moved above 36.15, which I guess you consider as a new base next to this big wild consolidation that it had before. So technically getting over that buy point, really strong volume. On an intraday chart, it was sort of interesting. It raced right away, came in there, came down a little bit, then came back up. It sort of felt like, I didn't ever get to that high from like the first 5 minutes, but yeah, right in there, it sort of traded consistently, and then it sort of moved out, and that was sort of the highest 5 minute close, because everything else was there. So it felt like that was a place you could have entered. And it's right around the official buy point too, so that was given confidence, and it just sort of moved a little bit from there. And on a weekly basis, this is a stock that had a lot of promise when it first came out, and then it struggled around the 36, 37 area. It actually got to the highest levels in a couple of years intraday, but only for a moment. But it is right around there. So this is a key area. Can it punch through all that? Would be a positive sign. On a technical basis, the RS rating is a 34, pretty lousy. I suspect that'll get a big boost given that it's the highest close in a year or so.
Yeah, maybe it can squeak on by this this trading range there, Ed. We'll have to see. Okay, next on our list, another big mover today, Embraer, with a big breakout, up 9% on the day. Also heavy volume here. Got back above a buy point, which it tried to break out of a couple of sessions ago and then pulled back. That is normal. That does happen with breakout stocks. Shook out some more holders there and really blew past that 27.25 buy point today.
Yeah, and this is sometimes it's like there can be multiple opportunities to buy a stock. Obviously, everybody would like to get at the very lowest price and then watch it run for 5 years. But this had a breakout and then a breakout, and now it's forming another base here. So that can sometimes, if these are winners, there will be other opportunities to get them. And there were early entries, as you're noting there, and there were early entries and other things. So there's been entries, plenty of chances to get into this one. Yeah, I tried to break out, but that was just before earnings, so that made it a little risky, but it held up pretty well. It sort of formed basically formed a quasi handle here, right around the 21-day line. Today moved out, had opportunities. I think to get into it. This one didn't pop up, so and now it's extended a little bit. But on a 5-minute basis, there was definitely times you had that first half an hour when it was still easily in range out there. So there was opportunities to get in. This is one reason why you want to have things on watch lists and form alerts. And so this was showing a lot of strength in that regard. RS line is at a record high, or at least a 52-week high, looking very strong, and that's after a prior uptrend. So a lot of things to like about this name. And a lot of aerospace stocks are doing well. That's a strong group, especially when Boeing has been just a disaster, which is probably a positive thing for Embraer, actually, to a certain extent. So, so for this one to be up so high with that, it's there's a lot to like about this name.
Yeah, I was about to say it does seem that way. And even though we did see, a 7-cent loss here, if you're looking year over year, definitely an improvement there, and 25% top line growth. So we like to see that as well. Last but not least, let's check in on CrowdStrike. This was today's stock of the day, Ed, and we were talking about how last week potentially actionable, getting back above the 10-week line, and it's still in range from that.
Yeah, it really hasn't moved too much off of that. And I think by the end of the day, it's sort of getting up toward clearing last week's highs. Yeah, so that would have been something where you could have done it. And again, maybe looking at intraday one more time on this is that you could sort of see it was sort of pausing for a little bit around those old highs and then really decisively got from the highs from a couple of days ago and stuff, just sort of moved out and um, showed some strength. It's still pretty close. I think it's only like 4% or so above the 50-day line or the 10-week line. And so
Yeah, 5% above the
5%.
10-week, great level
So
to manage risk against.
yeah, and you could also be thinking, I'm just going to start a position here. There's technically the buy point is pretty high up there. That's getting up there. That was a wild woolly earnings. Yes, you had exactly. There was sort of a draw the line breakout. Almost all the trading, if you can get a little bit above 338, it's a pretty obvious buy area as well. So this is a place where you could be starting a position. You could have done it over the last week or so, and gets above this area. That could be a place to fill out a position, or you could still just start a position at that point.
Mhm.
This was one of the biggest winners in the rally. I didn't take advantage of it, but this one was breaking out before the rally was getting going. I mean, that one was moving in the summer when the market was hitting lower, and so the RS line was surging up even before this one really moved out. So I had a really big run
Mhm.
along the way, and so this one is one to pay attention to once again as it tries to move out again.
Yeah, because not only does it have that price outperformance that we like to see, but the fundamentals here are quite strong with triple digit earnings growth
Yeah,
over the last 3 quarters and decelerating sales growth, but 37, 35, 33% over the last 3 quarters. Definitely nothing to sneeze at. We've got earnings coming up again, Ed, in about 3 weeks. So we'll have to see if between now and then we can get enough profit cushion here. There's definitely a chance. I think there's a chance that it could do that, but we'll just have to see. You never know.
yeah. When you get closer to that's always an issue. But yeah, there's a little bit of room that you could certainly try it at the very least.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you so much for that, Ed. And thanks everyone for tuning in. That is it for today. But be sure to check out IEBD Live tomorrow morning, 10 minutes before the opening bell. Investors.com/IEBD Live for all the details on that. Could be a lot to talk about tomorrow. I feel like, well, there's always a lot to talk about, but especially tomorrow, interesting things could be happening. So make sure to join us, investors.com/IBD Live. We'll see you there. And then we'll also see you right back here tomorrow after the close.